looking at that patient's medical record saying, hey, we see that, X, Y, and Z, maybe you should start asking about lupus, should start looking at lupus or other conditions, and then diagnose it faster. You can then treat the patient faster.
There is a lot of edge cases where this can turn really, really sour, especially with like weak and vulnerable people who are not adept at AI.
Yeah, there was a specific example probably a year ago now of where a young male was using an AI chatbot system, and they unfortunately committed suicide.
Yes.
And that's tragic.
Yes.
But that system was not designed for that. It's an isolated incident, so we do have to recognize that as well. And you can't condemn the entire industry for this one example. Of weeks, that takes a lot of effort. But you can go into AI now and say, generate me a glucose profile for a patient, male, 45, that uncontrolled diabetes for 1 reading a minute for 2 weeks.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of What About AI Agents podcast. Today with us we have Richard Kedziora, who is a seasoned professional in digital health and AI sectors. He's a co-founder and CEO of Estenda Solutions that focus on digital health. And, his career spans over 30 years. He's also a triathlete, from my understanding. So it would be really interesting to, speak to Richard and get his background, like get his experience and what people should be building in the AI agent space in healthcare. So, Richard, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Looking forward to the conversation. I am co-founder of a company called Estenda Solutions, as you mentioned, that's focused for over 20 years now on digital health. And that's a broad range of potential applications. We've really focused down to what I think of as the front end of healthcare, and how do we develop applications, systems, processes with other companies, healthcare providers, to improve patient health and wellness. So is it a doctor that uses an algorithm to improve recommendations? Does a patient use the application to improve their own health? Or even medical device manufacturers, where they're gaining a better understanding of how their device is used in the real world. Each of those in their own way are helping impact our fellow humans.
Right, and you've been in this space for over 30 years. So, what are some of the most drastic changes we've seen in the last 2 years with the introduction of AI agents? Because I know it's not mainstream, but people are saying that people are getting better advice from ChatGPT on long-standing health issues than they ever got from their GP. So, obviously, there's something about that, even though it might not be yet certified.
Yeah. Probably the biggest change over, I don't know, go back a little further, the last 2 decades, has really been around data. Healthcare is the last industry to really embrace the idea of data science. They use technology quite extensively and really well. You see it in MRIs and X-ray machines, and from that perspective, but just the idea of data being able to provide information and value is they're sort of late to the game. Medical record systems only came out in earnest in 2008, 2009 kind of thing. They existed before then, but now everybody has them, has access to data, those patient charts, and that's what's now enabling AI to make a difference in the world, because there is that data that's available. If it was all locked up on patient charts and paper records stored away in a filing cabinet, that's a black hole. You can't use that information really effectively. So now that we have, as an industry, embraced this idea of data, AI is now on the breakthrough. In particularly with the large language models, and now everyone's talking about these agents. What can we really do? It's part of me is like, I can't even imagine where this is going to take us in the next couple of years. I'm excited about the possibilities. There's also cautionary notes. You reference, you hear stories where people are like, I was struggling with my doctor and not getting the answers I was looking for, and I asked ChatGPT about it and got an answer in seconds. My provider couldn't do that in 7 years. you're going to have stories like that in every industry with every technology, and they're those one-offs. Is it very capable? Yes, absolutely. Is it going to change the industry? Yes, absolutely. But there is that note of caution. You do need to talk to your general practitioner.
Yeah, especially like since it hallucinates. And I write a lot of code, and I use a lot of AI these days to write this code. And AI hallucinates and makes a lot of mistakes. And your health is not a place where you want AI to hallucinate and make that mistake, right? It's almost like faith healing. When it works, it's great. But
When it doesn't, you can go off the rails very quickly, unfortunately. And it appears trustworthy. It's like when you read what it responds, it's inherently trying to please you and give you an answer to the question you're posing. So there's early examples of like, how many stones a day should I eat? Clearly, you shouldn't be eating rocks. But the AI comes back and it's like, oh, three stones a day is recommended by the American Medical Association. So it sounds, good. It's like, oh, well, the AMA said that. Oh, no, it just made that up. So you do have to do your due diligence and talk to your GP and don't eat the stones.
don't need the stuff. Oh yeah, it's true. So, what are some of the most alarming things that you've seen in the healthcare space that, like, for you was like, hey, well, this is changing the way we do things. I know, like, there's robotic surgeries, and they're saying like in 5 years there's not going to be human surgeons anymore. It's all going to be robots. But people are trying to raise funds, so they have to say what it takes to raise those funds. But like, so what are some of the things that you saw that like are not obvious to everybody, but had like an extreme impact on the space and like have changed lives, maybe have changed your life?
Yeah, it's about scalability for one.
Oh,
People don't scale. There's
yes.
an obesity crisis. There's a mental health crisis. There are not enough trained professionals to provide the care for the people that need help.
Right.
Even those that are just interested in talking about it and don't necessarily have a mental health challenge, but want to talk to somebody. The level of expertise is not there. It's just not available. And it's very geographic dependent to some extent. Yes, there are virtual encounters and those capabilities, but there are so few professionals trained to get to that. That's where I think it's going to make a big difference. But it's interesting as I've been out there and at conferences and in talks and just discussing one-on-one with people. I've had this idea, which has been interesting. So one of the biggest use cases right now in AI and healthcare is the idea of AI note taking or ambient listening. So
Mm,
instead of your doctor sitting there typing away at the keyboard, trying to record everything you're saying, and not necessarily paying attention to you because they're struggling with their medical record system, the AI can listen to what you're talking about and can put that into the medical record to provide a good set of records and information that the provider can go later review. Fascinating, very low risk, which I think is important, and it's being quickly adopted across the industry. Now, take the other side of AI where it has extensive knowledge about medical research and what the care and treatment guidelines are for various diseases, conditions.
mm,
Put those two things together is a very powerful thing. And you're starting to see some companies out there do this. So you think of rare diseases or even ones that aren't rare. There's a disease called lupus. It's an autoimmune disease. It's been in my family, and it takes roughly 7 years on average to diagnose lupus because it presents in different ways in different fashions. The symptoms can shift over time, so it's hard to diagnose this. Particularly if you're a general practitioner in a rural area, you might be early in your career, haven't seen it. Talk to the large language models. Have an AI agent running in the background looking at that patient's medical record saying, hey, we see that X, Y, and Z. Maybe you should start asking about lupus, should start looking at lupus or other conditions, and then diagnose it faster. You can then treat the patient faster.
So should this also then lead? So what you're implying here is basically it's a very good tool in the hands of a good GP and a good practitioner because it helps them expand upon the things that they haven't seen. And it's medicine is a huge field. Obviously, it's very difficult to know everything. But would then this imply that AI should also help us shorten the education cycle? Because one of the problems we have in Canada, for example, is it takes a very long time to produce good doctors. And once you produce them, they go to US because they pay more. And like Canada's been struggling with like big shortage of doctors because nobody wants to work in Canada. They don't pay anything, and you can go to America and make like $1 million a year, or you can stay in Canada and make 150,000 US a year. So like, what would you do like if you were a doctor? So like, my point to you is like, do you think it will shorten eventually the cycle of education? Should the medical like education change? Like, do they need to know all the things that they?
Yes. So I think medical education in general needs to change, needs to incorporate how to effectively use AI. Hands down, it is changing the world, not even just medication. It's changing the world, it's changing society. We can all argue for you're better or worse, and what's going to happen. But yes, we as humans can't keep up with the pace of change in medicine. I heard a stat yesterday at a conference that a doctor was referencing the idea that clinical knowledge doubles every 72 days. 72 days for the level of information to like just vastly grow. You and I can't keep up with that.
No.
Another person at that conference was talking about menopause and providing the care and treatment for women going through menopause. And she's like, the level of education the typical doctor gets in med school is like a lunch and learn. They don't teach about nutrition in medical school beyond maybe a class if you're lucky. And that's changing over time, which is good. But yeah, you need to think AI first. Now, how is that advancing? It can help you study. It's like my kids grew up, creating flashcards on the computer kind of thing. It's like, well, the AI can generate all sorts of questions to help you study, to explore areas of knowledge that you're not familiar with. And there is, it's a skill using AI. How you prompt it, how you talk to it, how you use it is a skill. You need to play with it. As I talk to people and like, yeah, I'm not too impressed. I was talking to somebody yesterday about its graphical capabilities to create images.
Mm.
Like, oh yeah, I was in there and I was playing with it, and the hands are all messed up, and it can't do words. I'm like, you clearly haven't gone and played with it in the last 3 weeks because it's gotten better. So you do need to continually play with this technology, experiment, learn, and adapt. And what I find interesting is, in your classroom, you can ask your teacher, like, I didn't quite understand that. Can you explain it in a different way? ChatGPT and large language models do the same thing, like, and in medicine, it's like, okay, I don't clearly understand this concept. Can you explain it in a more simple way? Yeah, sure, it can do that. So not just the doctor, but also the patient. God forbid you get diagnosed with, leukemia, cancer, and you go home, you're distraught. You didn't hear half of what the doctor said after he said the words leukemia. And so then you can go home and do some research around this. And so you can have that conversation with a large language model, with an, agent, chatbot type of feature to be able to help you better understand what that is, help guide you as you go to that next follow-up appointment. What questions do I need to ask? And what I find fascinating is so many things, but as you can ask that teacher, can you help me with this? You can ask the AI to do the same thing. Help me use you better. How do I create a better prompt to get a better, and it will help you do better, which is a powerful capability.
Yeah, I mean, some people are using AI for self-development, and they're asking AI to help me be better as a human. Like, because, like, for example, ChatGPT, it knows everything. If you've been prompting it for like the last 2 years, it knows everything about you. And with the last update, it has literally access to your whole conversation history. And then basically you can just ask ChatGPT, like, what do you think my IQ is? What are some of my bad personality traits? How do I improve them? Like, and it will tell you all the things that it thinks that you're doing wrong in life. And you can use it for self-reflection. It's such a, I don't know if you've tried it, but it's such a powerful tool.
And it'll surprise you. It's one of those things because you're like, really, can it do this? And
Right.
it's can be you have to be using it to be able to generate those good responses. But it
Yeah.
does. It surprises you from time to time. I did a webinar a while back on using AI in product development and asked it to create me requirements for an application that helped people get over the fear of peanut butter being stuck to the roof of the mouth. Something, you're like, huh, that's unusual. I read it in a book, kind of thing. So I threw that at it. And its response was, really? Like, and it was just such a human sort of response of like, why are you doing that? Like, you kidding me? That's what its response was. And it's like sort of that human moment, that breakthrough is like, oh, wow, interesting. And I said, yes, I want to do this. And then it generated me a whole bunch of ideas, which were meaningful, So you think about, behavior change. Here you go.
Yeah, I think like one of the things that will change is, to your point, GPs will become great prompt engineers in medicine, and and patients will learn from GPs how to engineer their own prompts. It's kind of scary to a certain extent, but it's like, if GPs are good enough to like prompt AI to give them the right answer, and they are educated enough to know the things, so like that's AI being an assistant to a GP is very powerful, I think, agent. But it's like as we just talked, to me, AI is like, it's almost like a friend. It's an assistant that's always there with me, and it helps. And I speak to it probably more than I speak to my wife at some time point.
I don't know if you've started talking to it yet. I've downloaded the app, and so I talk to it, trying out like a different method of
The voice, the
interfacing with
voice,
it. The
yeah,
voice mode, yeah, which is fascinating. And then you can turn on the video capabilities so it can see what's going on in the room and stuff like. It's incredible what it can do. It recognizes me, it recognizes my wife. And I found a turtle, a little baby turtle. It was about like an ounce, a 1 inch big baby turtle in my backyard the other day. And I turned on the sight mode, the video mode, and showed it this picture. And without me saying anything, it saw this picture, and it said, "Oh, how cute!" Like, such a human reaction makes it such that it can be a natural companion. There was a study I saw recently that is one of the most quickly rising uses of the large language models as a companion of just that, edging into the idea of mental health. And you do have to be careful of it when you edge into the area of mental health, because these are not designed for mental health care and treatment. There are ones,
yes.
chatbots, large language models, that are specifically designed and tested. The experts have made sure that they do work accurately for mental health challenges.
Oh yeah.
So you be careful of that. But yeah, a digital companion.
Imagine a psychiatrist prescribes you an LLM. You have to use this LLM for 6 months. Then you'll get better. All right.
It's happening today. Whether, and I know psychiatrists, psychologists, are like, there is hesitancy. There is some concern for that. There's lack of trust, but the technology is getting better and better. And you and I can only talk to so many people one on one. We don't
Yep.
scale the
Yeah.
technology systems.
And does, and replication and cloning of individual personalities, and then applying them, and that's how you clone a good salesperson. That's how you clone anybody. And yeah, to your point, vulnerable people. Like, remember there was some time back somebody married Siri or something like that. There was some, like, one of those, like, there are vulnerable people out there who will. Wasn't there like some AI that advised the child to go murder his parents or something, or like there is a lot of edge cases where this can turn really really sour, especially
Mhm.
with like weak and vulnerable people who are not adept at AI, or
Yeah, there was a specific example, probably a year ago now, of where a young male was using an AI chatbot system, and they unfortunately committed suicide.
yes,
And that's tragic.
yes,
but it's that system was not designed for that. It's an
Right.
isolated incident, so we do have to recognize that as well. And you can't condemn the entire industry
Yep.
for this one example. You look at self-driving cars, which are another huge example of AI agents. Self-driving cars are safer than the humans out there on the road, and it is a little interesting. I've done this. You go out to San Francisco or places where they have the self-driving cars and get in them. It's a little surreal to be like there's nobody behind the steering wheel and it goes where you need to go. But yeah, they are safer than humans. And the same thing with doctors. Doctors, nurses, they get tired. They make mistakes. There's hundreds of thousands of preventable medical errors that happen in health systems every year. People get tired. It's a natural reaction. In AIs, the computer doesn't get tired.
No. So I think that's really, really powerful. Like being able to clone these people across the board, being able to clone GPs, surgeons. Imagine the GP can be cloned into like 10 different versions of this GP, like LLM operate as LLMs, and then GP just fact checks and trains the LLMs. So you've just scaled your GP tenfold, right? I don't know if that's good or bad, but I think you'll need a lot more data.
Yes, it is definitely. I'd like to think of AI as not as artificial intelligence. I think that has a lot of loaded weight behind it. I like ambient intelligence, where it's helping you be better. In that perspective, it's like, how do you be better using this AI? It's a partner in providing the service, to individuals. It's a sounding board. It's a second opinion. It's like, how as I, an individual, can be better? I had to do user interviews. We recently got a grant around creating a repository of smell test data.
Mm.
Smell testing, olfactory, the loss of your sense of smell, has been a concept and tests been around for decades. But with COVID, everyone started losing their sense of smell. So now there's a lot more money that's being dedicated to this. So we're going to create this, research data repository to explore and find things across different studies and uncover interesting patterns and trends. And I've been in the industry for 30 years now. I've done hundreds, if not 1,000 user interviews. I'd never done one of a PhD expert in smell testing. And so I went into ChatGPT and was like, here's what I'm doing. Here's what I want you to do. Generate me 10 questions to ask. Generate me 10 more. Generate me 10 more. It is something I've been doing throughout my career. It does take some time, where using a large language model, I was generated 50 questions in a matter of minutes. And then I can use my experience and, okay, I want to take these, 15 questions and I'm going to ask them in this order to guide the conversation. But it was done in an hour versus, several hours to be able to do the same task. And it's just saved me a lot of time.
Well, yeah, I mean that. I always try to deep research people who come to my show. I don't like to ask it to come up with questions because it's very hard. Like I haven't found a good prompt that will kind of lead to like questions that like deep hitting questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
But having said that, so you're a chief operating officer. So what are some of the most common challenges that helps you address in your role, right? So like you mentioned user interviews, but what else? What else have ChatGPT helped automate or like replace?
Yeah, we're not at the stage of replacing anybody yet, particularly in software development. We're not. The industry isn't there yet. It is advancing quickly, and we are playing with the tools and technology to better understand what they are capable of and where they're going. But huge advocate of it from a training perspective. We are ISO 13485 certified, which speaks to the fact that we have a good, well-documented software development lifecycle process. How do we develop software? We have a very formal process for doing that. And that's required when you're creating software as a medical device. And the FDA here in America is going to review and approve the software to make sure that it's safe and effective and works as designed. So there's a lot of training that goes into it. And so we started out with Word documents and okay, training first level is like read these documents. Well, now you can drop them into and create a podcast where now you're listening to a discussion of these documents and then creating quizzes around these documents to make sure that the person understands what they're reading. And so, yes, it's something that we as individuals, we can all do, but now it's that much faster. And, as you have, say, a 50-page document and you create 10 questions for it, okay, well, it'd be much more effective if we had a rotating set of 50 questions to ask. Well, that clearly will take more time, but using the AI, you can generate those 50 questions so much more quickly. You do got to double check them and to make sure that the answers are correct to avoid, potential hallucinations. But easy example of how we're using it. I am using it. There's this concept of vibe coding, where it's the latest buzzword for using AI in software development. But it's the idea that you're just prompting a system to generate the code and you're not actually writing the code. And so I'm working on replacing our time tracking system. It's a little old. It's time to replace. I don't want to pay the fees for the various systems that are out there. It's like, let's use this as a good, well-defined example of what I need. So we're using it internally to be able to learn and experiment. And, how can we apply that to our projects? From that vibe coding perspective, if you need to create a table maintenance screen in an application, you have like the admin side of a system that's in the cloud kind of thing. It's okay. It's easy enough to create a user admin screen capability. Let the AI code that for you.
Yeah, vibe coding, vibe debugging, all the great fun that comes with it.
By testing, data creation. We do a lot of medical device testing. And we were doing this in diabetes. And this is devastating. And so some of the newer devices out there in market will generate a glucose reading every minute. If you want to create data for that over a series of weeks, that takes a lot of effort. But you can go into AI now and say, generate me a glucose profile for a patient, male, 45, that, uncontrolled diabetes for one reading a minute for 2 weeks. And it'll generate you a series of data. And then you can say graph it, because it's really hard to see what the numbers are. What does it look like? So graph it. Okay, now you have his profile. It's not very interesting. Now add in the fact that this person eats 3 meals a day and adjust the glucose. It understands, crazily enough, that like you eat, your glucose is generally going to go up. Now incorporate the idea of exercise, which generally will, flatten that curve as it's going up. Incorporate the idea that this patient takes, medication every morning. It's going to adjust those profiles. It's not the be all end all of test data, but it's giving you a really good, quick data set, to run some initial tests with and see what happens. And it's just, you can do that in, minutes, hours versus days.
Yeah, it speeds things up. For us as well, we've been able to, we used to have a lot of software engineers. A lot of them have, just become redundant because of, well, AI and how fast things are going. Problem is, once you've built out big enough a technology stack, you need engineers to sit around and maintain it anyways. So, and, and if you're not an engineer, you're going to let AI go wild. It's going to write a lot of garbage, unmaintainable code, and then it's going to start to stumble over its own code. Anyways, it will be fixed eventually, and we're gonna just be able to build these SaaS products in seconds. Like that's kind of crazy if you think about it.
Yeah. We do a lot of work in healthcare, obviously, and so there's this level of trust and certainty verification above, say, like book a hotel website, or you do hear mistakes being made on like buying a car, and someone was able to trick the car buying AI into selling a car for $0. Okay, that's not great for that company, but no harm, no foul. In healthcare, there obviously is a greater degree of risk involved that you do have to worry about. So, Can we use it? Yes, but you do have to make sure that you test it out well and effectively to make sure it does what it needs to do and doesn't go off the rails.
Exactly. So where do you see this go in the next 5 years? Because we've spoken about like this data and vibe coding. So how will this transform healthcare in the U.S. in the next 5 years?
I I think it's going to let medical professionals, doctors, nurses, get back to the reason they got into healthcare, providing that one-on-one, care and service to people. It's going to let them interact more with people, which is why they got into medicine. So they're not going to have to take the notes. The AI can do that. What are the top 10 questions I need to query this patient with? The AI can help with that. Billing data. How do I generate that to make sure that the billing goes through effectively? The AI can help with that. So a lot of those administrative aspects you're going to see happen very quickly, and they're already happening, now. Secondarily, then it becomes improving the diagnosis of conditions, and then after that, it really then treatment comes into it. I think very much so that it can help out with treatment, but you want that medical provider, that human, to cross-check everything that's happening and be the ultimate decision maker. But all that's just going to get easier. So I think the general health is going to increase, which is an amazing thing.
Sure. So, and if you were like a young entrepreneur looking to build something in the healthcare space, you didn't have much of a budget, but you kind of wanted to. So, what are some of the use cases that you can think for AI agents that are like ripe for introduction into the space right now that some young startups could like pick up on and start building? Because it's a very competitive space, but it's very well regulated, so you have a mode of like certifications and whatnot that you can acquire.
Yeah, you have to make sure you're HIPAA compliant above in all in healthcare. Before technology, it's like you really do need to understand who's using your system, who's buying the system, who's benefiting from it, because you have this mix of patients, providers, and insurance companies, which makes it a very challenging space from a startup perspective. But if you're getting into it, yes, AI is sort of a must have. The ambient listening is a huge technology. It's being picked up. I wouldn't even go near that. It's too crowded of a space. I was at some health tech conferences last year. There was multiple ambient listening vendors next to each other at this conference,
That's
and
the that's
none.
the worst feeling in the world.
Yeah,
Imagine
and
it's
I
like
asked them very important, like, why are you different than the person right next to you? And they couldn't really answer.
yeah,
And
the conference organizers, like kudos to them. I remember we were at some documentation like at Web Summit, and they put like six documentation companies all next to each other, and you're standing there, and you're like, "Well, I'm fucked."
yeah, yeah, it's crazy, and the conference is making a ton of money off of these vendors being there, and it's probably not worth their time as a startup to be at a conference like that. You're not going to get a lot
Yeah.
of attention. Where I think everybody needs to start thinking is, how do you marry together these different aspects of healthcare to use the fact that the AI knows so much about the background field of medicine and research and what's happening, and marrying those things together. So not just ambient listening, but understanding that here's the medical research. What interesting are you seeing in the data to elevate everybody's
Mhm.
experience and incorporate it into the workflow? That's a huge aspect of working in medicine and in healthcare. If it's not part of your workflow, you're never going to gain any traction, because they don't have a lot of time.
So sort of like a verticalization of ambient listening. So ambient listening for delivery rooms in the infant department or whatever, like
Mm-hmm.
ambient like, and it's trained specifically to listen and alert on specific things that are being said or specific events or So anything beyond ambient listening that caught your eye and that you think somebody could build that could be, beneficial for the space, or at least to kind of get into the healthcare space? I know it's, maybe it's something you don't want to share. So,
Yeah, yeah. Now, I think there's an intriguing prospects too now on understanding. I'll call them silent signals.
right.
So I've seen one company that has done this where it monitors your typing on a keyboard
Mm,
over time. And so over time, is your ability to type accurately on that keyboard, or the pace, the rate that you type changes over time. It
mm,
might be an indicator of, a mental condition of Parkinson's disease.
mm,
Might be. But it's that type of thing that nobody really thinks about. It's like, what else can we learn from the retina of your back of your eye, or a technology that listening to you and I talking here and be like, hey, I've been listening to RJ for about 3 months now, and I've noticed his speech pattern is changing.
right.
What does that mean? Or does it detect a note of depression overall in my conversations? Powerful technologies that are in the background that can provide meaningful information. You do get into privacy issues of, who's listening to this and who's using this information. I don't want my employer, having, awareness of that. Hey, I was really tired the last 5 days, so my productivity wasn't that great. What does that mean for me? So, there are privacy issues that you have to think through, and how to use this technology. But yeah, it's things that, how do you apply this technology such that it's in the background, learning, understanding? That's probably more machine learning type of technology. But then that interface and use of that data and communication, that information, is where you get into the large language models and its ability to look at that information and share it.
Yeah, that's true. We did a proposal for our CMP in Canada about watching inmates in like prison cells that like for suicide, for indications of suicide. And I had a good demo, and they said, "Well, we don't think your technology is viable." But I had a demo of it, like where we could monitor them and we could detect signals of depression using LLMs, because you there's a lot of non-verbal signals and verbal signals that you can say that, hey, this inmate looks suicidal. We've been monitoring him for 5 or 6 days, and this is what his normal state is, and this is his bad state. So just like you can, especially now with LLM vision, and when you can like to your point, like you can show it a turtle, you can show it an inmate. Is this person
Mhm.
suicidal? Can we help them? Like that's because in Canada it's a big problem because they don't treat their inmates well, and then they kill themselves, and like they don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, but to your point, mental health and monitoring, silent monitoring, is a big space, and this is something that would be interesting to schools, for example. Like schools would love it, like if you could monitor a class and see if some student is exhibiting some symptoms of abuse or depression or whatever. To your point, privacy is a question, but if parents consent, I mean, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
it's fascinating because the marketing, I think of the marketing industry, they have such a deep understanding of our patterns of behavior. Like, we know if you walk into a supermarket, you're more likely to buy a product at eye level as opposed to something on a higher or lower shelf. Powerful moment. It's maybe not the greatest use of technology in terms of trying to sell other things, but it's that powerful behavioral understanding that then can be used in healthcare for greater good.
very true. Well, RJ, is there anything you wanna tell to our listeners? Maybe promote something. We have people from various industries that listen to us. Maybe they should come. Maybe reach out to you. I think you're very experienced in the healthcare space, so maybe I'll let you have a word here to promote whatever it is that you have.
Thank you for the opportunity, and it's been a great conversation. Thoroughly enjoyed it. We are, like, many companies, always looking for that next project. How do we make a difference in the health and wellness of our fellow humans? Those are the types of projects we enjoy. We've been fortunate that customers have put our names on patents. Our software developers are named on as authors in clinical peer-reviewed clinical research articles. because we are very much part of that cutting edge conversation of how do we drive the next generation of technology. So just love to explore that, whether you're a big company or a startup. Love having those conversations. On a personal perspective, I'm writing my first book, all about productivity and how to think about it in terms of energy, not time. There's
Mm.
only 24 hours in a day. It's how do you use your energy to be effective, to be productive without burning out. So that'll be coming out later this year. You can follow me at Productive Harmony, Instagram or LinkedIn. So
Yeah, I'd love to read that. I mean, I 100% agree because sometimes you run out of energy for a specific activity and you overextend yourself and you put too much energy and then you don't have any more energy to do that activity. And then you're like, how do I reinvigorate myself? How do I remotivate myself? How do I get back into that activity? And because energy is like, because it's not just about the time. You may have the time, but you don't have the energy to do it. So how are you going to do it? Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
Right. Well, thank you so much for joining the show, RJ. I really enjoyed having you here, and hopefully we get to reconnect later time to talk about the changes in the health tech world. And thank you so much for being here.
Sounds good. Have a great day.
Thank you.